presenting the concept plans.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so Jennifer, if you could go ahead and lead out, that would be terrific.
Great, thanks Oz. Thanks Doug. Give me 1 second while I adjust my screen. So today I'll be presenting to you our current budget allocation and our proposal for a budget additional funds for the next 6 months. Doug, if you can go to the next slide, please. Sorry, I lost my screen here. There we go. Okay, so as a reminder, first I wanted to review our current budget allocation. And as you recall, the board has allocated funds to the clinical program for the Cure Sickle Cell partnership with NHLBI of $30 million and $1.84 million for progression awards for the DIS2 program, which totals a current allocation of $31.84 million. As of today, there is $17.4 million remaining in the Cure Sickle Cell allocation and about $350,000 remaining in the progression awards allocation for a total of $17.8 million in remaining research dollars. I also wanted to point out and note that at the end, as of the end of November, there's an additional $8.8 million in uncommitted funds due to return funds from our current active portfolio. Next slide, please, Doug. So this next slide displays our proposed request for additional research funds for the period of January through June of 2021. And this is to restart our core funding pillars for clinical, translation, and Quest. Today, Dr. Gil Soberano will be presenting the concept plans to restart these core programs. As you can see from this slide, we are requesting $100 million to relaunch our monthly reoccurring cycle of the clinical program offering, $60 million to open the translational program for 1 review cycle, and $22 million to relaunch the Quest program for 1 review cycle. The total proposed allocation to fund these new awards over the next 6 months in these areas is $182 million, which we estimate could add about 36 new awards to the CIRM portfolio. In June of 2021, we plan to bring in an annual research budget for this committee to consider in concert with any new concept plans along with the strategic planning. Next slide, please, Doug. So today, at this time, we are requesting the Science Subcommittee approve this recommendation to the ICOC for this additional $182 million to support research programs as proposed for January through June of 2021. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions about this budget.
Thank you. And has the Finance Committee acted on this yet?
The Finance Committee met earlier this on Tuesday to review the administrative and operations budget, but we did not discuss the research budget.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments, questions from?
He had a comment, but he is on mute, so I just wanted to let him know.
No, I was just going to say to Oz, now that I'm not on mute, that this isn't really the province of the Finance Committee. It's more the administrative side that we deal with. This is just always handled by the Science Subcommittee and then the board.
Maria, can I add a comment here?
Yes, go ahead. And Oz is on mute. I saw him also talking, but I want to let him know.
Okay.
I'm reading lips today. It's perfect. Okay.
So just to review the process for everybody, the funding will of course come from new bonds issued by the state. Jen and I talked to the sorry, just looking here for a second, talked to the state treasurer's office to discuss this process a couple of weeks ago, and it basically will be to resurrect what we've done historically, which is every 6 months we talk to first the Department of Finance and the governor's office to lay out what we believe will be the funding needs for the next 6 months. And once they sign off on that, they then direct the state treasurer's office to issue bonds on behalf of CIRM, which is done as part of a semi-annual funding issuance they do on behalf of all state agencies, once in the spring and once in the fall. Those funds are then held for our purposes at the state level until such time as we need to disperse them. The timing of this works out actually very well because the first reviews that we believe we will have in the CLIN awards will be in March, which will go to an application review subcommittee in April. And as those awards are made, that'll dovetail virtually precisely with the state treasurer's issuance of the first new tranche of bonds under Prop 14 for the awards. And so the $182 million that Jen is requesting will be funded out of that. And so all we need to do here to trigger that discussion is to approve this measure, at which then of course will be brought to the full board on December 21 for consideration. But this is sort of going to be a very seamless process given the timing of the state's bond issuance, and we should be in very good shape to fund everything going forward.
Great, thanks, JT. Jennifer or someone, could you say a word about how the specific amount, the total amount, and the different buckets within that amount were derived?
Sure. So we looked back as historically at our funding cycles over the past several years in CLIN as well as translation and Quest to look at average award size within the award caps that Dr. Sembrano will be presenting later, as well as frequency, how many applications were awarded or deemed meritorious, as well as taking into consideration we haven't had for specifically a translation round in a while, so making sure that we were estimating the demand that could happen as well.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Questions from other members of the committee? If not, I think this is an action item. So if we could have a motion to approve this proposal to go forward to the full board for consideration.
This is Steve Julesgaard. I make that motion. I move that we accept this proposal.
Is there a second?
Second.
Good. So any further discussion? If not, we can ask for public comment if there are any.
I do not see any hands raised. If you have public comment, if you could please raise your hand. I don't see any, Oz.
Okay, excellent. Then Maria, could you call the roll?
Oz Stewart.
Yes.
Deborah Deese.
Yes.
Anne-Marie Dulege.
Yes.
Judy Gasson.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard.
Yes.
Dr. Malmed. Art Torres. Art, you're on mute.
Aye.
Thank you. Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Christina Vori. The motion carries.
Excellent. So we'll move to the second consideration that we need to have today, which is a presentation, I think, by Gil. Is that correct?
It is.
Excellent. I'll turn the
Yeah.
microphone, I guess, over to you.
Thank you, Oz. So, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, good afternoon, everybody. As you know, we have had a set of recurring discovery, translational, and clinical funding opportunities since 2015 in order to support stem cell-based research. However, in the last couple of years, and Doug, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. In the last couple of years, there have been limits on the available budget, and so certainly that has prevented us from opening some of those core programs And then we've also had some modifications that were made in response to things such as the COVID-19 program. But now with Prop 14 passing, we have the opportunity to restart many of these programs. And so we would like to begin with our core disc-strand and CLIN programs, much as we had before all of happened with the budget limitations. So our goal is to relaunch with only the necessary changes so that we can start them up as quickly as we can. However, just in anticipation of what we plan for the future, we do plan to bring more comprehensive changes later on that would align with the strategic plan that we could bring to you in June of next year. So next slide, please. So just as part of the overview, the proposed relaunch would accomplish a few things. One, it would restore some of the features such as the award limits. In many cases, we decreased amounts, so it would bring those back up. The award duration, it would extend it to the full capacity that we had before, and other elements that were available prior to the COVID-19 program. The proposed concepts would at the same time retain many of the recent elements that were added, which we thought offered great value, such as addressing the needs of the underserved communities. So that would be retained, as well as adding some new requirements, such as a data sharing plan, which I will briefly discuss. The changes also, in some cases, align the concepts with Prop 14 requirements and definitions. Next slide, please. So let me just begin by giving you the overview of the global changes that are happening across all the concepts. So one of those is the addition of a requirement for all applicants to provide a data sharing plan and an allowance for them to include related costs in the budget. And so how this works is that the applicants must, in their proposal, include a plan that describes the type of data shared, how it will be collected, where it will be deposited, the timeline for the collection and depositing of that data, and the associated costs that would go with that. And so this will be subject to GWG review, and thus will be evaluated as part of the application. And so this is a beginning to what we hope will be more defined requirements around data sharing, but we thought it was at least important to begin with a requirement for applicants to tell us what their data sharing plan would be, and obviously to encourage the appropriate sharing and use of data. Next, we are also removing a requirement to deem gene therapy projects a vital research opportunity by the GWG. So the reason for this is that under Prop 14, the scope over which CIRM has authority has expanded. So it now includes gene therapy, and so therefore we don't need the vital research opportunity component to be weighed in by the GWG for that. So we're striking that out, and then also just broadly including gene therapy projects as in scope for CIRM funding, much in the same way as general stem cell projects are allowed. We are also adding, where it was not previously included, the requirement to address the needs of the underserved racial ethnic communities throughout these concepts. Next slide, please, Doug. All right, so these changes are specific to the DISC-2 program. So the DISC-2 program, as you may remember, the discovery awards intended to identify a candidate therapeutic, a medical device, diagnostic, or tool. So here, some of the changes are related to the costs. So we are restoring the direct project costs to allow up to 900,000 for therapeutic candidates and up to 500,000 for a diagnostic device or a tool. We are restoring the duration to 24 months. We previously had that at 12 months. We are restoring the PI percent effort requirement to 20%, and also updating the project initiation to be within 60 days of approval. Our lessons in being able to be a little bit faster during our process has allowed us to actually improve upon that. So we're making the project initiation time shorter than it was. Next slide, please. For the TRAN program, there's not much that is changing in the concept documents, simply because we really didn't make that many changes as it was not offered. We are making the same update to the project initiation timeline, shortening that up a bit, and then also just making sure that we are offering all 4 flavors of the TRAN program. That means that they will allow funding for therapeutics, devices, diagnostics, and tools, which each of those 1, 2, 3, 4 represent. Next slide, please. Finally, the proposed changes to the clinical program. We would be launching CLIN 1, which is for IND enabling work, CLIN 2, which supports clinical trials, and CLIN 3, which supports activities for registration and approval of a therapy for those that have an existing CLIN 2. And most of these changes fall on CLIN 2. Here we would be restoring the award limits. And so there is a table that lists those in the concept document that was distributed. But those are restored to what we had before. We more recently decreased the award amounts to about 75% of what we had. And so we're going back to 100%. The award duration is restored to a maximum of 4 years. And we had decreased that to 3 years since we did not know whether we would have a window to manage awards beyond 2023. Project initiation has been restored to 45 days from approval by the board. And we are proposing the change of percent effort for project manager to 50% for these CLIN 2 awards. We previously had this at 75%, but our experience over the last several years of managing these awards suggests that 50% is more than adequate for this. So we went ahead and proposed that change. And then we also have a clarification. The language in some places is unclear, and specifically in one area with regards to therapeutic eligibility, we just want to make clear that minimally manipulated bone marrow, cord blood, or unmodified HSCs are eligible for phase 2 or phase 3 clinical trials. Next slide. So that's the summary of the overall changes. As mentioned, the concept documents with those track changes were distributed. So I'm happy to address any of those questions that you may have, but our request to you is simply to approve the proposed amendments for DisTran and CLIN so that we can move them on to.
Yes, I have not necessarily a question.
Thank you, Oz.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes, it's Deborah Dees. In looking at some of the changes and the additions, especially the one related to addressing needs of underserved racial and ethnic communities impact, I really think that we should, through a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, go a step further. Whereas the investigators should list in the application how they're going to address the needs of underrepresented communities, of what would be the impact. However, I would like to see, to the extent that they are engaging people from underrepresented backgrounds in the work that they do, either as PI, co-I, staff, and others. So and then I'd like to see, even in the application, that we begin to look at some of the demographic data of those individuals involved, so that we ensure that we are promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion.
What language would you suggest, Dean?
Well, NIH has some language, and NIH actually, you list some of the demographics as well. So we may be able to look to the institutes to get some of the language and sort of follow that. Additionally, what I had in mind, NIH also has programs where we can implement supplement grants to awardees that come from underrepresented backgrounds if they can align with a major grant that we have. I think CIRM may want to take notice of that as well, in order to improve our diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. Yes, question, comment?
Yes.
Art?
I would like to see us incorporate those suggestions and incorporate the endeavors to search out for the appropriate language in this area, not only because I believe that we have been lacking in diversity, especially with PIs across the state, but also something that I picked up during the campaign as I visited with various groups, especially Latino and African Americans, and Native Americans for that matter, to get their support for Prop 14, of course, on my own time and on weekends. But the real issue was mistrust, and especially from the African American Latino communities, mistrust of the science, mistrust of who's doing the science, and mistrust in the end product. And we're seeing that now with COVID vaccine utilization and how we have to reach out. And I'm glad that President Obama and Bush and Clinton are going to do their vaccinations as soon as possible. But at the end of the day, we have to show some commitment, because a lot of these communities supported us by reissuing Prop 14. We have to show that we understood and heard their concerns and their messages by implementing language that, even if the NIH already has, we should be having as well. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. Other comments?
Dr. Gasson has a comment. Oz?
Hi, I actually have a question for Gil. I understand how gene therapy is now in scope of Prop 14, and it no longer needs the vital research opportunity exception. My question is, going forward, will we still entertain proposals to fund vital research opportunities? And if so, what can you give me an example of what one would be?
Yeah, so our authority still allows for vital research opportunity consideration of other areas, but usually how we have worked that is that we bring concepts about an area of research that could be a vital research opportunity to you, to the board. And if we get approval, then we would include it as part of our scope within, some or all of our funding opportunity programs.
Thank you, Gil.
Okay, yeah, so Maria Milan, I think that you might have a comment related to this issue. If we could ask you to
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. It's Maria Milan. I wanted to, first of all, thank the board for so much input and into this very important topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And to also let you know that in the midst of our strategic planning, we're trying to work out a way that this is, as much as this problem is systemic, that we actually embed it in all aspects of how we do business. So you'll start to see some of that coming forward in a lot of ways. But to address the immediate comments of Dr. Dees, absolutely. And there are the standards, both from the NIH and the FDA regarding these topics that have been brought forward by leadership, including Dr. Abla Creasy, who's our head of therapeutics. And we're underway with our operational team. We are able to, even under the current requirements for reporting, able to make sure that we improve our way of capturing the information, the demographics and all that that you have stated is very important. We have some of it, it's not as complete as it could be, and it's not as deep as it could be. So we're working operationally already to improve upon that with Jennifer Lewis and grants management. And then regarding workforce development and equity and diversity in the workplace, absolutely number one top priority for us. And just some important examples of how we've already, we continue to institute this, but recently I've had feedback from our grantees that they were really very impressed by how our CIRM team was very, very strict. Even in our past grantee meeting, they reevaluated their speakers because there were some folks that you kind of immediately go to invite as speakers. And they said, because of CIRM, and these were women, minorities, they said, I forgot that we should look at this. So all of us need to be reminded in everything we do to make sure that we have appropriate representation, even within our PIs, our students, and everything else. So Senator Torres has been, pushing us on this for a very long time, always reminds us, and we're taking it very seriously. But you'll see some more rollout as you start seeing kind of the strategic concepts. That the idea is this should be woven into the fabric of everything we do at CIRM, from our operations to the types of awards, to the way we conduct research, and to the type of workforce and leadership we're building because of our programs. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share that.
Thank you, Maria. That's great.
Thank you.
So are there any other comments along these lines?
I have a comment about the data sharing whenever we get to that.
Sure, now's as good a time.
So I'd like to know, first of all, what gave genesis to writing this paragraph on data sharing? Who decided that we needed to do that? Why?
Do you want me to answer that, Oz?
Yes, please. Sorry.
So in this process that we're going through, this process of strategic thinking and concepts that we're developing with our board, external stakeholders, and through our own diligence in terms of what's out there in the world, one of the things that's front and center is that in order to really gain true acceleration and value in the research we fund, we just need to do better in terms of forming these knowledge networks and capturing the data and making it in a way that's acceptable to all parties, and of course protects privacy and all of those types of things. But that we're just not as good as a community, as a scientific community, and being able and having the discipline. Even the NIH has a strategic plan related to data sharing, just because they know that this is absolutely crucial. So it's something that has come up in a specific panel that Dr. Keith Yamamoto from our board actually led at the recent grantee meeting, which was excellent. We had leaders from around from the country, from ex-FDAers to private industry, verily, from the private sector, academia, patient advocates, those who are specifically focused on diversity and research. All of them were on the panel from the Duke Research Policy Margolis Center at Duke. So the whole panel had just given a very strong case for how not only is this something we should do, it's something that is absolutely critical in research today, especially with the type of information that CIRM grantees are generating. We each carry, I don't know, I think he said 3 or 4 terabytes of data. Each of us have 3 or 4 terabytes of data that are out there in the ether space. And if there is a better way that we can get this together, that it will bring things forward in terms of our ability to solve the problems, because what happens is there's all these informations in different silos. So of course, we're not going to solve the whole thing, but what we could do is apply discipline to the research we do fund. There are already existing repositories that exist and are large repositories where people should be putting their information, but maybe there's no structure or accountability for doing that. So this is the first step. It's not prescriptive. It simply says, to start off with, give us the best plan for how your data is going to be shared and where it's going to go. It should be informative. And then from there, we could come up with a rational plan with more input from all of the different areas of expertise that's needed to be brought forward to the board and in the evolution of this whole kind of idealistic but necessary and achievable, if we do it, goal of data sharing and being better about using all of the data is generated to bring research forward for the entire community.
So I could just add to that, actually, Maria, one of the things that I think was maybe a trigger for continuing discussion on this was our meeting last year, the town hall meeting, where this whole issue of data sharing came up. And there was a very strong feeling at that meeting about the importance of data sharing and what was being lost because of the lack of it. I think that I might have said at one point when somebody kind of raised an issue, I believe I said, well, if investigators want to take some money, then this is one of the conditions that is a reasonable condition. So I mean, it has a much deeper history, I think, even than from the time of the voters panel.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That was a GWG feedback meeting, and yes, Oz, you did say that, and we take it very seriously, and we continued it on through the strategic concepts phase.
So my biggest concern is in the area of intellectual property and confidential information, and that doesn't seem to be distinguished here in the data sharing plan. That there's an expectation that anything that a party considers to be their confidential information or their intellectual property, there's no even thought of sharing that data. So to carve that out right up front, because otherwise I see this as a disincentive to a number of parties who need, in order to be able to develop compounds, and this is particularly true in those CLIN awards and also to some extent the translational awards. If you're in the position of having to release what you consider to be very confidential data that becomes public information, you don't want to go there. You don't want to take any money that provides for that. So that's my biggest concern in seeing this data sharing plan language, is there's not a carve out for confidential information or other related intellectual property style information.
If I may just comment on that, Dr. Stewart, is that okay?
Yes, please. Of course. Yeah, I was going to call on you anyway. So, yeah,
okay, sorry, but I know some of the board members wanted to speak. Is that okay? I saw you there.
Please.
So there are, and it's in the language in the RFA that it abides by the FAIR principles that the NIH also uses, and there are actual standard practices and policies that have been developed in data sharing, and the most recent examples of that are in the COVID crisis with all pharma players, agreeing to that. And also there are Gates Foundation partnership along with all the major pharma players in the COVID research. So they're used. And those account for the intellectual property issues that allow the investigators to protect their intellectual property while still sharing information. So the way this is crafted, as Gil had said, it's not prescriptive in order that the individual applicants at this stage, and we call it the phase 1 rollout or the pre-rollout of any type of data sharing, will be able to, as long as they give a reasonable plan, choose their way of how they deposit their data, but we'll know where it is. So we'll have a table of contents, index, what have you, at least to start off with, that should inform a better way of being able to create this knowledge network.
Thank you, Dr. Mullen. Any other questions or comments along those lines?
Well, just so I understand that, just to take it down a very practical level, if somebody writes in their data sharing plan that they have no intention of sharing anything they deem to be confidential information or otherwise protectable intellectual property, that'll be fine, right?
Yes, they need to protect themselves. So yeah.
Okay, good.
There are already data sharing requirements, period, from doing anything. Like if they have an IND, they have to deposit their data. The NIH, if they have any NIH funding, they need to share their data. So we're just trying to make strides forward in terms of creating ways that it's actually done, and it's done in a more organized fashion that's useful to everybody. And that's the intent.
Right. And, I think that one of the things that this whole initiative is meant to achieve is a amplification of the impact of the data that people are generating. In terms of, outcomes of clinical trials, we still have a situation where a lot of data from failed clinical trials are not shared. And, that damages the field. We are losing a ton of understanding by not having some better way of seeing those things. But I think, again, that those are sort of the nuts and bolts of issues that'll have to be worked out going forward as people kind of begin to adapt to this new paradigm.
Well, also, there could be a lot of value in a failed clinical trial that you don't want to disclose because it points you in a different direction for the next clinical trial, et cetera. So, it's a line that has to be walked. I wouldn't necessarily say failed clinical trials, the data has to be disclosed because there could be a lot of valuable proprietary information contained within that failed clinical trial.
These are definitely issues that need to all be worked out, but I think it can be done.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, any further discussion, questions, comments? Our action item, I think, was on the last slide that Gil showed, which is to have a vote to pass this concept plan on to the board for consideration at the December meeting.
Point of order, do I need to incorporate a motion to this report that Dean Dees and I talked about, or is it just understood that staff understands that that's what at least some of our board members prefer?
Yeah, I would prefer that we have a motion and we get that in there. And just in addition to what I stated and Art, I would like to make sure that as we are scoring these awards, that this is included in the scoring process as well. It certainly incentivizes the PIs to do more.
Okay, I think that's great. And thank you for bringing it up, Dr. Dees. I guess I'm a little confused about how we proceed procedurally here, so to speak. Art, or maybe James, can you help us understand, should there be a motion to modify, or before we consider the whole thing, or what is our appropriate step here?
Since there's no motion on the table at the moment, Dr. Dees or Senator Torres are free to make a motion to recommend approval of the changes to the concept plans with the incorporation of language specifying that applicants need to include information and demographic data regarding both underserved communities that they intend to serve, as well as representation from underserved communities as part of the research team.
Right, great, nicely restated. And also add that this will be a part of the scoring too.
Okay, thank you, James.
So
Well,
moved.
I second that motion by Dean Dees.
When you say it's going to be part of the scoring, how do you intend that to work?
Well, I see, well, with the scoring, there's different sections, I'm supposing. And so I think there should be a section on diversity, equity, and inclusion on all of these grants.
So do you think a grants working group is the right level at which these decisions should be made? Are they really competent to weigh in on that sort of thing? This for me is almost an ICOC issue, not so much. The grants working group is really a scientific group, and now we're transmuting them into something beyond that.
Okay, well, while they're a scientific group, they send up to us the score of those grants just based on the science.
Right.
And we want those grants to be based additionally on other factors.
If I could, I'm always a little nervous. You guys know me. I'm very much kind of procedurally focused here. I'm always a little nervous in trying to do really important things on the fly. And I'm just a little worried about trying to do too much here to work all this out. I wonder if we could have a motion that doesn't really specify kind of the details, but brings it forward to the board as an important element for discussion as part of this concept plan, but ask the CIRM team to maybe put some language to it that spells out whatever a proposal might be in terms of where this review should take place, considering appropriately the roles of board versus the grants working group as defined by Prop 14. Can we do that
at the board meeting?
Yes, at the board meeting.
Yes,
that's
reasonable.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that seems reasonable that the CIRM group, the staff, could work on that and then be prepared to present it at the board meeting.
And by that time, we should have an analysis of what the NIH does so that we know that we're complementing, if not enhancing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be great. So let me try to formulate this motion, and you guys can correct me, but it's sort of what James said in the beginning, but the motion would be to approve the concept plan going forward with a request to the CIRM team to put together a plan for consideration of the issues of inclusion and outreach at all levels, and a proposal for where that consideration should actually be, where the ranking of that consideration should actually occur, whether it be GWG or at the board level. Does that?
Or December 21st meeting.
Yeah. So that sounds great. The only addition or amendment that I would put, instead of the word consideration, I would say implementation, because I think we need to go beyond considering it, but tell us how you're going to implement this.
Okay. Good. Do we have that motion in sufficient detail that somebody actually can say it in a better way than I did? James, I always look to you for this.
I'll give it a try. So recommend, so the motion would be to recommend approval of the concept plan amendments with direction to the CIRM team to propose language regarding implementation of a plan to consider serving underserved communities as part of an application, consideration of representation from underserved communities on research teams, and consideration of this information in the scoring of applications.
Good. That captures it for me. Do we have a motion on that language?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Keyes. And the second was
Art.
Art.
okay. For the board, I'm sorry, further committee discussion. Do we have public comment on this?
We do not have any hands raised, Oz.
Okay, excellent. Maria, then could you call the roll?
Absolutely. Oz Stewart,
Yes.
Deborah Deese,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Yes.
Judy Gasson. Judy, you're on mute, I think. But I think you said yes. I read lips. Okay. David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. I think that concludes our business today. Is that
It does.
great? Okay, well, if there are no other comments, entertain a motion to adjourn. Somebody, come on.
Excellent
Okay.
job, Mr. Chairman. Move we adjourn.
All right. I'm going to take somebody's nod as a second here. So thank you all for attending. I thought that was a really good discussion, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody at the next board meeting in December.
Thank you.